Darkness has a way of speaking, sometimes through whispers in the fog, and sometimes through reflections that should never exist. Tonight I'll share with you 6 chilling true horror stories, voices in the dark and things that stare back from the mirror. Before we begin, if you love true horror stories told in the dark, make sure you subscribe, click the bell, and leave a like so you don't miss what's waiting in the shadows. Our first story takes us deep into the fog where silence feels heavier than the air itself. And yet, it's never truly silent. Out there, among the trees and the mist, voices sometimes drift through the darkness. But they don't sound like echoes, and they don't sound like anything human. This is where our first encounter begins, with a cabin hidden in the fog, and the voices that refuse to let her leave. In the heart of an overgrown forest, the shadows lengthened, weaving between the twisted branches and gnarled roots. Ferns whispered secrets in the unsettling breeze, and a thick fog drifted like a shroud, veiling everything in an ethereal pallor. Emily, a young woman with a penchant for exploration, had heard tales of a forgotten cabin deep within these woods, a place where the past lingered even after the living had moved on. With her heart racing and a mix of excitement and dread churning in her stomach, she ventured down the winding path, each step echoing with the crunch of dried leaves and the rustle of unseen creatures hiding just out of sight. The deeper she wandered, the more the oppressive silence wrapped around her, as if the forest were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Finally she spotted it. A dilapidated cabin, half swallowed by the earth and creeping vines. The windows were cracked and dark, resembling sunken eyes peering into a world they could no longer comprehend. Squaring her shoulders, she approached, her breath hitching at the thought of what she might uncover within. The door creaked open, a long-forgotten invitation filled with a musty scent of decay and memory. Inside, the air was thick with dust, each particle illuminated by slivers of light breaking through the dirty windows. Old furniture lay strewn about like the remnants of a failed life, an overturned chair, a cracked mirror reflecting only the gloom around her. Emily's pulse quickened, alternating between fear and curiosity. She pressed forward, drawn to a staircase, its steps sagging under the weight of countless unacknowledged secrets. As she ascended, the wood groaned beneath her, and a chill flickered across her skin, almost beckoning her to turn back. But something pulled her onward, an insatiable need to uncover what lay at the top. There she discovered a small room, its walls lined with portraits of somber faces. They appeared to watch her, their expressions frozen in sorrow, as if warning her that some doors are best left unopened. Then she noticed a peculiar painting in the corner, different from the others. It was an eerie depiction of a girl with hauntingly familiar features, a girl who could have been Emily herself, captured in a moment of despair beneath a darkened sky. A wave of nausea washed over her, and instinctual alarm bells ringing in her mind. The air turned heavy, pressing against her chest as she stumbled back, wanting to escape, to flee before whatever presence resided there ensnared her. But then she heard it, a soft, almost innocuous whisper drifting through the air, the words threading like a spider's web around her mind. "Stay with me," it beckoned, a voice laced with despair and longing. Terrified, Emily spun around only to find no one there, the empty room echoing her panic. The whisper intensified, swirling until it filled her mind, drowning her in a sea of voices, a cacophony of pleading, sorrow, and rage. "Stay with me, I won't let you leave." Emily turned to flee, scrambling down the staircase in a frenzy. Each step felt as if she was being dragged back, an invisible force tethering her to the cabin's dark history. The door wouldn't budge, it slammed shut as though it had a will of its own. Panic surged through her, and she slammed against it, desperate for freedom, her breath quickening until the room spun. Just when she thought the force would crush her, it relented, the door creaking open as if releasing her for having passed the test of will. She stumbled into the forest, the daylight bathing her in a false sense of safety. Heart racing, she sprinted back the way she came, branches scratching at her sides, the whispers now a chorus, warning her she was not alone. As she broke free from the trees, fear coursed through her as she glanced back just once, expecting the cabin to remain hauntingly still. Instead, it was gone, the ground where it stood just bare earth and broken branches. In the place of the forgotten structure was an unsettling quiet, as if the forest was inhaling deeply, ready to purge the truth buried within. Days turned to weeks, and no matter how far she ran, she felt its presence shadowing her. The whispers never ceased, weaving through her thoughts, growing louder at night when she was most vulnerable. Yesterday she saw her reflection in a mirror, and for the first time, it didn't quite reflect her. The girl with familiar features stared back, smile twisted and eyes pleading. "Stay with me." The echo danced along her spine, now a familiar lullaby. And one wind-strewn night, when the air felt especially thick with intrigue, she found herself drawn back to the edge of those woods, compelled to rejoin the shadows. What had once been a heart full of fright was now bubbling with a morbid curiosity. Perhaps it was time to answer the call. Our journey continues. The fog grows thicker, and this next place hides a secret rooted deep in the earth, beneath the shadow of an old willow tree. Let's step closer. The fog rolled in thick as night descended upon the little town of Eldermere. The streets, usually bustling with life, lay ominously empty, the only sound being the distant echo of a clock striking 8. Lydia clutched her coat tightly around her, the chill seeping through the fabric into her very bones. She could almost taste the dampness in the air, a metallic tang that made her stomach turn. She walked towards the edge of town, the fog wrapped around her like a shroud, soothing and suffocating at once. The old willow tree loomed ahead, its gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. It was a spot children dared each other to visit, a place whispered about in hushed tones, the Willow of Whispers. Lydia had heard the tales growing up, that at night it spoke to those who dared to listen. Curiosity gnawed at her. What would it be like to hear the whispers? Surely they were just stories born from the imaginations of anxious children. She stepped closer, the damp ground squelching beneath her boots, her heart racing with both fear and thrill. Suddenly the whisper began. It felt like a breeze brushing past her ear, too soft to catch the words. She strained to hear, stepping closer to the tree. "Lydia," it called, the voice unmistakably familiar. It was the voice of her late mother, gentle yet urgent. "Come closer." Chills danced up her spine. She hesitated, doubt creeping in. The tales spoke of those who lost their way, never to return. But the sound of her mother's voice was too enticing. She stepped forward, tears building in her eyes, longing to feel that connection once more. "Mom," she whispered, her breath fogging in the cool air. "Is that really you?" "Yes, dear. It's me," the voice echoed softly. "I'm waiting for you. Come get me. Together we can leave this place. I have missed you so much." Lydia's heart pounded as she reached out, fingers trembling as they brushed against the rough bark of the willow. She could almost imagine her mother standing just beyond the veil of fog, waiting with open arms. The air felt electric, charged with a longing she could barely comprehend. But then came the realization, cold and abrupt. "No," she gasped, pulling back as the whispers shifted into something darker. Distorted laughter slithered through the fog, wrapping around her like a noose. The familiar warmth of her mother's voice twisted into a demand, sharp and sinister. "Come, Lydia, you're so close now. Just take my hand." Panic surged through her and she turned to run, but the air thickened, weighing down her legs, roots from the tree snaking outwards, grabbing at her heels. The laughter grew, echoing her fear. The whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, overlapping and indistinguishable. She stumbled, trying to break free from the binds of the tree, but it felt like they were merging with her, pulling her into their realm. "Stay with us," the voices beckoned. "Forever." With a last desperate scream, Lydia ripped away from the grasp, her spirit screaming even louder. She ran blindly, guided only by the pinpricks of terror igniting every sense. The fog seemed to part, leading her back toward town. But as she emerged from the mist swirling behind her, her heart sank. The streets were empty, as if all life had been drained away. The clock tower stood eerily silent. The warm lights in the windows of houses flickered out one by one, leaving her in darkness as if the entire town had vanished. She stumbled to a stop, gasping for breath, alone and isolated in this sudden void. Taking a shaky breath, she looked back towards the willow tree. The whispers were gone, though she felt their presence lingering, insistent. And then, standing right where she had escaped, she saw her mother, or what resembled her. A gaunt, hollow face with eyes too bright, holding out a hand that was not hers to take. The apparition smiled, the corners of its mouth twisting into something grotesque. "Lydia," it sang, the fog billowing behind with an unsettling energy. "You've come home." As a shiver racked her body, she realized with dawning horror that home was no longer a place she could return to. With a final echoing laugh, the town of Eldermere faded into the mist, leaving Lydia forever lost in the whispers of the darkness. And now we move to the final tale. A fog-shrouded path, a whisper in the darkness, and a voice that was never human. This is the one you won't soon forget. The forest was thick with mist, a veil that swallowed sound and light alike. Lucy had wandered off the well-trodden path, lured by a whispering voice, barely audible amid the rustling leaves. She had always felt drawn to the woods, a pull that thrummed in her veins, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. But something was different today. As she pushed farther into the thicket, the atmosphere shifted, charged with an unnameable dread. The trees twisted overhead, their branches curling like gnarled fingers reaching for her. Shadows danced along the ground, flickering in and out of her view like restless spirits. Lucy called out, hoping to hear a familiar reply, but the only sound was the soft crunch of dead leaves beneath her feet. She shivered, a chill creeping down her spine that had nothing to do with the cool air. "Hello." She ventured again, her voice sounding small in the suffocating silence. A faint echo met her ears, but it wasn't her own. The voice was too soft, too melodic, winding through the trees, coaxing her deeper into the woods. Against her better judgment, Lucy followed. The deeper she ventured, the thicker the mist became, wrapping around her like a shroud. She pressed on, the voice now a part of her, promising secrets if she would only come closer. Goosebumps erupted on her arms as she pressed through thorny underbrush, the thorns grasping at her clothes as if trying to hold her back. She paused for a moment, glancing back toward the path she had come from, but the way was gone, swallowed by the fog. Suddenly the whisper grew clearer, more demanding. "Help me." It was a plea, one that sent a jolt of urgency through her. Lucy quickened her pace, heart racing as she felt the thrum of something ancient and powerful pulsing in the earth beneath her feet. She stumbled into a small clearing, the fog swirling thickly around her, and in the center stood an old well, its stones slick with moss. The voice emanated from within its dark depths, resonant with sorrow. "Help me. Retrieve what was lost." Lucy felt an inexplicable compulsion to approach, drawn by the promise of a truth concealed in the darkness. She peered over the edge, seeing only the abyss that lay below. "What do you need?" she called down, her voice a fragile thread against the overwhelming silence. "Your soul," the voice hissed, now laced with malice. "Give it to me and I will set you free." Lucy staggered back, a scream clawing at her throat. The air in the clearing chilled, the fog coiling tighter, revealing shadowy figures that danced just beyond her line of sight, their faces obscured, their eyes glinting with feral anticipation. Panic surged through her as she turned to run, but the shadows were faster, closing the distance, cloaked in ethereal mist. They grasped at her, brushing against her skin like ice. "You cannot leave," one whispered, its breath foul and rotten. "Join us, become one with the whispers of the woods." Lucy fought with all her strength, tearing through the mist, yet the trees seemed to shift, blocking her path, warping the world around her. Desperation clawed at her chest. She was trapped, ensnared by the very essence of the forest that had once drawn her in. In her struggle, she caught glimpses of faces in the shadows before her, lost souls, their mouths stretching into silent screams. Then, as if the forest itself recoiled from her fear, the shadows faded momentarily, revealing the well once more. The voice called again, seductive and terrifying. "It's your only chance, save yourself." They promised her everything, the escape from despair, yet the truth lay thick in the air now. She was not the first. Lucy could feel it, the weight of countless souls entwined with her own, urging her to give in. Heart pounding, she took a step back, defiance igniting in her chest. No, she would not become another whisper in the woods. But as she turned away, the mist closed in again, swallowing her screams as the shadows surged around her. The last thing she heard was the echoing laughter that filled the forest, the cold grip of realization washing over her. Deep in the woods, she realized with horror that they were right. She would never leave. The voice was now her own, lost among the whispers. The fog hides whispers that were never meant to be heard, but sometimes the horror doesn't speak at all. Sometimes it just stares back at you. In the next 3 stories, we'll step away from the woods and into the mirror, where reflections take on a life of their own. And if you've made it this far into the night, it means these stories have kept you close. So take a second to subscribe. It helps keep the shadows alive, and it makes sure you'll never miss what comes next. Our next story doesn't begin in the fog or the forest, but in the reflection of a mirror. A mirror is supposed to show us only ourselves, nothing more, nothing less. But sometimes, it shows something else, something that shouldn't exist. This is where her nightmare began, when she looked into the glass and saw a presence staring back that wasn't her own. The fog crept through the ancient trees like a shroud, thickening with each passing moment. The towering pines, gnarled and twisted, stood as silent sentinels, guarding the secrets of the forest. A low, lonely howl echoed in the distance, sending shivers down Mary's spine. She clutched her flashlight tightly, its feeble beam barely piercing the thick curtain of mist that surrounded her. Mary had entered the forest on a dare, her friends' laughter still ringing in her ears. "It's just a stupid story," they had said. "Nothing but old wives' tales." But as the evening light faded, the stories had taken root in her mind. Whispers of an entity that prowled these woods, a ghostly figure seeking the lost and luring the unwary into its embrace. With each step, the path grew more treacherous, the underbrush clawing at her jeans as if it wanted to pull her back. The world around her seemed to hum with an unseen energy, and the branches swayed ominously, casting grotesque shadows in her flashlight's glow. Mary called out for her friends, her voice trembling, but the only response was the wind, which seemed to mock her. She stumbled upon a clearing, the trees parting as if to reveal a hidden secret. At the center lay a decaying cabin, its windows shattered, the door creaking slightly as if inviting her inside. Heart racing, she approached, compelled by a mix of fear and curiosity. The air was heavy, saturated with the scent of moss and damp wood. She stepped inside, the room dark save for her flashlight beam, which flickered as if it sensed the danger lurking within. Old furniture lay strewn about in disarray, remnants of a life long abandoned. A musty smell mingled with a hint of something metallic, each breath a reminder that she was not alone. As the light danced across the walls, her heart dropped. There were scratches, deep and jagged, carved into the wood as if someone had tried to escape. Panic surged through her veins. Should she turn back? But something caught her eye. A mirror, tarnished and cracked, hung on the far wall. She moved closer, fascinated. Her own reflection stared back, but just beside it, she noticed a shadowy form lingering just out of reach, its features indistinguishable. She blinked and it was gone. The room spun, her breath quickening. "It's just a trick of the light," she whispered to herself, though her voice quaked with doubt. With trembling hands, she reached out to touch the mirror's surface, drawn in by the dark abyss it seemed to reflect. Suddenly a low whisper coiled around her, a voice slithering from the depths of the cabin walls. "Help me," it breathed softly. Mary recoiled, confusion and dread battling within her. Was it a plea or a curse? She turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. Her heart raced and the temperature plummeted, ice settling in her bones. Panic boiled within her as shadows flickered around her, merging into the form she had seen in the mirror. It was tall, its limbs stretched unnaturally long, fingers curled into sinister claws, and its face a void, eyes deep wells of despair. "Why do you linger?" it hissed, voice distorted and layered as if 1,000 voices spoke in unison. Mary stepped back, but the figure advanced, its presence suffocating. "You're here to help me, you're just like the rest." In that moment, realization dawned, a chilling insight that froze her soul. She was not the first to enter the woods. Friends' voices echoed in her mind, each one a memory, a promise of laughter vanished. They had been drawn into the same trap, their fates intertwined with this ghastly creature. "No," she wailed, turning to the mirror, desperate to escape. But the reflection showed the cabin forevermore, a prison devoid of hope. The door rattled, and the figure lunged toward her, becoming one with the shadows. As darkness enveloped her senses, the last thing Mary heard was the soft, mocking whisper, "Welcome home." Our journey continues. This next encounter with a mirror reveals something far darker than a reflection, something that was never meant to be seen. The forest loomed ahead, a dark curtain against the dusk sky. Old oaks twisted like gnarled fingers reaching toward the heavens, their branches whispering tales long forgotten. Climbing into his SUV, Ethan felt a sudden urge to drive closer to the heart of the woods. He wasn't an adventurous man, but something about those trees beckoned him. As he trudged along the path, shadows danced alongside him, flickering in the dense underbrush. The sun dipped lower, and the air turned heavy, pregnant with foreboding silence. A chill ran down his spine, but he dismissed it as the cooling evening breeze. After several minutes of walking, he stumbled upon an old cabin shackled by time and overgrown ivy. The windows were obscured by grime, yet a flicker of candlelight flickered inside. Curiosity tugged at him, pulling him toward the door, creaking on its rusted hinges like an old man's brittle joints. Inside, the air was thick with dust, memories suspended like cobwebs. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight. On the wall hung a series of photographs, faded black and white images capturing nightmarish moments. Figures blurred and twisted, their eyes void, mouths gaping as if caught in shrieks of despair. Each image felt alive, a scream frozen in time. Ethan's breath quickened, a primal sense of being watched crawling over his skin. He turned to leave but froze. At the far end of the room stood a mirror, its surface dark and cracked, reflecting only shadows. Something stirred within. He stepped closer, drawn by an unseen force. As his heart pounded in his chest, he caught a glimpse, his reflection rippling like the surface of disturbed water. It grinned back at him but then morphed into something grotesque. Fangs elongated, eyes gleamed with malice, laughter neither his nor human echoed from the depths of that glass prison. Fear surged through him, a venom coursing through his veins. He stumbled back, tripping over the journal that lay on the floor. Its pages flickered open, revealing scribbled horrors, prayers mixed with curses. Words like, "They come for you and never break the glass," screamed from the paper. A realization dawned, heavy and chilling. Around him, the chilling whispers grew louder, voices mixing in a chaotic chorus. The wooden beams of the cabin groaned as if the house itself were alive, a predator waiting to strike. Ethan's eyes darted back to the mirror, where his reflection was no longer there. Instead, he saw shadows moving behind him. He whirled around, but the room lay empty, yet the whispers intensified, wrapping around him like a suffocating fog. Panic clawed at his throat. Trapped in a web of fear, he remembered the warnings in the journal. With every ounce of strength, he dashed to the door, heart racing as he pulled on the handle, but it wouldn't budge, locked by some unseen force. He turned back toward the mirror, his reflection returning, eyes wide with terror now. The entity on the other side smiled, reaching through, fingers gliding past the shattered surface. Ethan backed away, but the room closed in, shadows inching toward him, tightening their grasp. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing the darkened woods beyond. With a surge of adrenaline, he bolted outside, gasping for breath, glancing back at the cabin. Yet it stood quiet, serene now, as though nothing had happened. He stumbled into the trees, the way home lost amid the oppressive gloom. Hours later, when dawn broke, Ethan still ran, unaware of the eyes following him from the shadows, waiting for him to look back, to blink. In that moment, when the sun kissed the horizon, he dared to take a glance over his shoulder. The trees shifted, whispering secrets he would never understand, and the forest smiled. And now we move to the final story, where a familiar face at the door may not have been human at all. Through the lonely streets of Eldridge Hollow, twisting around the gnarled branches of the trees that lined the cobblestone path. The moon hung high, shrouded in clouds, casting fleeting shadows every time a gust brushed by. Sarah wrapped her coat tighter around her as she walked home from the late shift at the diner, her footsteps echoing loudly in the stillness. She had always loved the peacefulness of this little town, but tonight, a sense of unease gripped her. Glancing behind her, she saw only darkness, yet an unsettling feeling crept up her spine. The kind that whispered she wasn't alone. She quickened her pace, her heart thumping like a frantic drum. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket and she fished it out, relieved to see a message from her brother. "Hey, you okay? I had a weird feeling." She furrowed her brow, a chill running down her arms. The message was odd, almost as if he sensed something she hadn't shared. She texted back, "Yeah, just heading home." As she turned the corner, the streetlights flickered, bathing the pavement in a stuttering glow. Sarah noticed something out of place. A figure at the end of the street, dark and indistinct, swaying slightly as if caught in an invisible breeze. Panic clawed at her throat and she hesitated. "It's just a trick of the light," she murmured to herself. Yet the figure seemed to draw closer, the darkness around it deepening. With each step it took, she felt a weight on her chest, as if the air itself thickened, pinning her down. "Who's there?" Sarah called out, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound strong. No answer, only the sound of her heartbeat echoing in her ears. As she turned to retreat, a chilling laugh echoed down the street, eerie and hollow, sending a shiver right through her bones. Was it real or a cruel figment of her imagination? Adrenaline surged and she sprinted toward home, not daring to look back. Reaching her front porch, she stumbled in through the door and slammed it shut behind her, locking it tight. The familiar comfort of her small living room felt miles away from the unease just outside. She sank against the door, gasping, her mind racing. What was that figure? Surely it couldn't have been. A knock reverberated through the house, resonating with a slow, deliberate rhythm. "Sarah?" It was her brother's voice, softer this time, almost pleading. Relief washed over her despite the strangeness of the situation. She rushed to the window and peered out. He stood under the swaying streetlight, looking anxious, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting something. Her heart swelled with worry, but every logical thought was drowned out by her growing dread. She fumbled for her phone to text him, but saw instead a string of increasingly frantic messages flashing on the screen. "Get inside. Stay inside. Don't open the door." Before she could process it, the door behind her creaked open, a cold draft slipping in. Sarah whipped around, her breath hitching in her throat. "It's okay. It's just me." A voice that sounded like her brother's echoed from within her darkened home, but it felt wrong, twisted. The voice was familiar, yet carried an undertone that distorted it, a smoothness she had never heard. Panic surged. Her brother was still outside. She had seen him. The figure was inside, calling to her in his voice. No, it couldn't be. Her gut screamed for her to run, but where could she go? Behind her, the darkness stretched, watching and waiting. Sarah stumbled backward, heart pounding. "If you're really my brother, say something only you would know." Silence answered her, thick and suffocating. Then the front door eased open completely, revealing a silhouette that looked just like him but distorted, a grinning face that hovered too close, eyes glinting like glass. The familiarity twisted into something grotesque as it took a step forward, shielded in darkness, the real horror lurking behind. "Sarah," it whispered, the voice oozing with malice. "Let me in." And all the while, outside, a frightened shout pierced the night, a scream swallowed by the wind as the moon gleamed down, indifferent to the nightmare unfolding in Eldridge Hollow. Whispers in the fog, shadows in the woods, and reflections that should never be. These 6 true horror stories remind us that the dark is never empty. It's watching, it's listening, and sometimes it's speaking back. If you made it this far, thank you for staying with me in the shadows. Don't forget to subscribe, click the bell, and leave a like if you want more nights like this. Until next time, stay safe. And whatever you do, don't stare too long into the mirror.